I grew up in the United Kingdom, but the life I knew and experienced every single day was incredibly far removed from the picture-perfect, innocent childhood that so many people might imagine or see on television. I was raised in an extraordinarily poor family where financial struggle was not just a passing phase, but a permanent, heavy cloud that hung over our heads. On my dad's side of the family, we came from a traveller gypsy background, a marginalised community that often faced its own unique set of severe hardships. We grew up in a tiny, cramped council house where the walls felt like they were constantly closing in on us. The overwhelming struggle to simply survive was something we breathed in every single day. It was an inescapable, harsh reality of our daily existence, a constant reminder of everything we did not have. But as difficult as the grinding poverty was, the lack of money wasn't even the hardest part of my upbringing. The true nightmare was the relentless, unpredictable chaos that lived inside those walls with us. My father struggled deeply and profoundly with alcohol. It wasn't just a casual bad habit or a weekend indulgence. It was a dark, vicious demon that consumed his mind, his body, and his entire existence. I watched, completely helplessly, as this terrible addiction tore my family apart, piece by agonizing piece, day by painful day. The darkest moment of my entire life, a horrific moment that still haunts my memories and brings tears to my eyes to this very day, was when my dear, beloved brother died from a devastating alcohol-related incident. I will never, ever forget the chilling day the doctor looked at us in that cold, sterile hospital room. His face was heavy with pity and sorrow, and he spoke the absolute hardest, most shattering words I have ever had to hear in my entire life. He looked directly at us and said, "If he wasn't drunk, he wouldn't have died." That single, piercing sentence completely shattered my entire world. It broke something so fundamental inside of my young heart that I genuinely thought it could never, ever be fixed or healed by anyone or anything. You would logically think that losing your own flesh and blood, losing a precious son to such a senseless, avoidable tragedy, would wake a father up. You would think that this immense grief would be the ultimate turning point, the massive shock needed to finally put the bottle down forever. But tragically, instead of healing, the unbearable, crushing weight of that tragedy pushed my dad even deeper into the pitch-black darkness of his addiction. He went to the local pubs even more frequently. He drank heavier, trying to drown a sorrow that could never be drowned. I saw him less and less as the days turned into weeks, and the weeks into months. And then, as if our family hadn't already endured enough unimaginable pain, came the ultimate betrayal, the final, devastating blow to our deeply broken home. My father ran away with a 15-year-old girl. He left his entire family behind, completely and utterly abandoning us without a second thought. He turned his back on his responsibilities, on his grieving children, and on everything we were supposed to be. And it was all because of the absolute, unbreakable grip that alcohol had firmly planted on his lost soul. The sheer agony of that sudden, complete, and selfish abandonment left a massive, bleeding, aching void right in the center of my chest. It was a suffocating void of rejection and worthlessness that I would spend the next several years of my fragile life desperately, frantically trying to fill. I foolishly thought that I could magically escape the crushing, suffocating pain of my grim reality by simply running away and becoming someone else entirely. At the incredibly young and vulnerable age of 14, an age where most girls are just worrying about school and friends, I packed up my fragile, broken dreams and headed across the world to the bright, deceptive lights of Los Angeles. I trained rigorously to be an actress. I genuinely, desperately believed that the flashing cameras, the glitzy Hollywood glamour, the red carpets, and the superficial validation of millions of absolute strangers would finally make me feel whole and worthy of love. I threw myself entirely, obsessively, into that cutthroat world, chasing a shimmering illusion of happiness that always seemed just out of my reach. I tried so many different extreme things in my life to find just a tiny ounce of lasting contentment. I chased professional success and recognition with every single ounce of energy I had in my body. I purposefully surrounded myself with wealthy, famous people who seemed to have absolutely everything figured out. People who looked flawless and perfectly happy on the outside. But I quickly learned a devastating truth. At the end of the long day, when the bright studio lights were finally turned off, when the loud, extravagant parties ended, and I was all alone in the deafening quiet of my room, staring at the ceiling, that dark, familiar, painful void was still right there inside of me. Acting began to feel incredibly empty and soul-crushing. The glamorous world I was completely immersed in felt painfully superficial and toxic and entirely hollow. I was spending my days playing all these different fascinating, complex roles on screen, reading scripts written by other people, but behind the scenes, behind the heavy makeup, the designer clothes, and the forced fake smiles, I had absolutely no idea who I truly was. I didn't know why I was put on this earth. I felt exactly like a wandering ghost, trapped in my own seemingly successful life, screaming silently on the inside where no one could hear me. Everything in my life completely miraculously changed in the year 2019. Feeling burnt out and emotionally exhausted, I decided to take a spontaneous trip to Istanbul, Turkey. I went purely as a lost tourist, desperately looking for a temporary distraction, a simple change of scenery to escape the overwhelming anxiety of my daily life in the entertainment industry. Let me be perfectly clear. I was not looking for God. I certainly was not looking for a new religion or a spiritual awakening. I was just a profoundly broken, exhausted young woman trying to find a momentary, fleeting sliver of peace in an incredibly loud, demanding, and unforgiving world. One crisp, beautiful afternoon, I found myself wandering aimlessly around the historic streets, and I ended up standing right in the middle of the grand, majestic square, situated perfectly between the breathtaking blue mosque and the magnificent Hagia Sophia. It was right there, standing absolutely still in the middle of that historic, awe-inspiring ancient place, looking up at the majestic minarets touching the sky, that I heard the Adhan, the Islamic call to prayer, for the very first time in my entire life. I stopped dead in my tracks, my breath caught in my throat. The incredibly beautiful, melodic sound echoed through the crisp Turkish air and seemed to bypass my ears completely, wrapping directly around my deeply wounded, bleeding heart. I remember standing there, completely frozen in time, unable to move a single muscle, thinking to myself in pure astonishment, wow, that is so incredibly beautiful. That is so profoundly, overwhelmingly peaceful. The exact specific way that the essence of Islam made me feel in that tiny split second of time, I honestly cannot even fully describe it with human words. I was just struck with an undeniable, crystal clear realization. This is the truth. Nothing in my entire chaotic life, not the successful acting roles, not the relentless, exhausting pursuit of fame, not all the glittering, expensive distractions in Los Angeles, not the money, the praise, or the attention had ever, for even a second, given me this profound, overwhelming, all-encompassing feeling of absolute safety and contentment.
It was exactly as if my tired, wandering soul recognized that divine sound long before my logical mind could even begin to process what was actually happening. I knew with absolute, unshakable certainty in that exact moment that I couldn't just walk away and go blindly back to my old empty life. I immediately walked into a shop and bought an English translation of the Holy Quran. I desperately needed to know more about this faith, this beautiful, grounding way of life that possessed the power to make my chaotic, severely anxious heart feel so incredibly calm and secure. Shortly after I returned home to the UK from that life-altering, monumental trip, the entire world suddenly and unexpectedly shut down. The global COVID-19 pandemic hit with full force, and we were all thrust into strict, mandatory lockdown. While so many people around the world understandably felt trapped, isolated, and terrified, for me, it felt like the most profound divine intervention from God. I was finally forcefully stopped from running away from myself. I was forced to sit in absolute, uninterrupted stillness. For long, quiet months on end, I spent my days and nights reading the Quran, absorbing its infinite wisdom, crying over its verses, and deeply, rigorously researching the true teachings of Islam. I had struggled with severe, crippling, debilitating anxiety for years, a lingering, heavy, suffocating shadow from my traumatic childhood, and the sheer instability I grew up in. But during that quiet lockdown, alone in the sanctuary of my room, I started to actually pray. Every single time, I physically placed my forehead softly on the ground in sujud, submitting myself completely and utterly to the Creator of the universe, acknowledging my own weakness and His supreme greatness. The heavy, suffocating anxiety simply melted away into the floor. I found a physical, mental, and profound spiritual relief that I honestly, truly never thought was possible for someone as broken and damaged as me. During that transformative time, I also started seeing the true beautiful character of practicing Muslims around the world. I saw their immense generosity, their unwavering, selfless kindness, their deep modesty, and their incredible steadfastness and patience in the face of immense adversity. This beautiful reality completely and utterly shattered every single negative, toxic, and false stereotype that the mainstream media had ever fed me throughout my life. Their beautiful, living example of faith in action strengthened my own growing faith day by day. Finally, during that exact same COVID lockdown, sitting all alone in the quiet confines of my bedroom, but feeling more deeply connected, more understood, and more genuinely loved than ever before, in my entire 22 years of life, I took my Shahada. I declared with absolute unwavering certainty and a heart full of blinding light that there is absolutely no God worthy of worship but Allah, and that the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, is his final messenger. The very second I fully embraced Islam, my entire perspective on human existence completely, irrevocably, and beautifully shifted. The heavy, dark veil was finally lifted from my tired eyes. I realized with sudden, blinding clarity that the superficial acting career I had desperately, hungrily chased since I was a scared 14-year-old girl was absolutely no longer serving my soul. It completely contradicted the values of the dignified, modest, and purposeful woman I was rapidly becoming, the exact woman that God Almighty intended me to be. So, I made a decision that shocked everyone around me. I gave it all up, completely, forever. I walked away from the lucrative scripts, the endless auditions, the demanding agents, and the fake, empty glamour without a single second thought or a drop of regret. Instead of seeking the fleeting applause of humans, I decided to use my given voice for something real, something that actually mattered in this life and the next. I started a YouTube channel to honestly share my personal journey, to meticulously document my rocky path to the ultimate truth, and something absolutely miraculous and humbling happened. I began receiving heartfelt messages daily from people all over the entire globe, from the US to Asia to Europe, who were actually converting to Islam just from hearing my simple, honest story. God beautifully and mercifully replaced my empty, hollow pursuit of worldly fame with a profound, meaningful, and eternal purpose. Today, I dedicate my precious time and energy to sending free Qurans to people everywhere who are actively, desperately searching for the truth, just exactly like I was searching when I stood in that square in Istanbul. God has generously given me a love that is so incredibly pure, a divine love that actively heals those deep, festering, painful childhood wounds that no therapist or medication ever could. People in this world constantly say that love is love, but I promise you, the immense, unconditional love of your Creator is the only thing in this entire universe that will ever truly, completely, and permanently complete you. I finally, after years of painful wandering in the dark, found my ultimate path to light. And I pray from the very absolute bottom of my healed heart that by hearing my story today, it somehow, in some beautiful way, helps you finally find yours.